Good morning, Mr. Cutler. Good morning, Mr. Cutler.
Good morning.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Want to tell us who you are and where you were born?
My name is Max Katler. I was born on September 25th, 1911, in the town of Šiauliai in Lithuania. I spent most of my first years after World War I started. We were banished to Ukraine, and we lived in a town of Dnipropetrovsk, or Yekaterinslav called at that time. It's a big city on a Dnieper River, and the reason we went there because my father had 4 brothers there living. My father was taken in the army in 1914 and wound up in a German prison where he worked in the coal mines. We could not communicate with him, and when the war ended in 1918, he came back, didn't know where we are, so he came back to Yekaterinslav, to his brothers, and we got in touch with him there. We stayed there for another 3 years till we had a chance, after Lithuania was established in 1918. We went in 1921, we went back to Lithuania, where we called our home. I entered the public school. It was a Yiddish school. Lithuanian language was taught only part-time. And I graduated from a middle school in 1929. After this, I got a job as a bookkeeper, and I had a good job. But times was not too good, but we had a free life, and we could pursue our own things, what we wanted to do. I got married in 1936 to Masha Kirkel. The girl, we knew each other for a long time, and we went to school together. Our first child was born in 1937 on June the 29th. Shortly before the war between Russia and Germany started, another child was born to us, a daughter by the name of Miriam, on September the 6th, 1940. 1940, in June the 15th, Lithuania was taken over by the Russians, and since things started to fall apart, the businesses, so I went to work as a bookkeeper in a textile factory. I worked there till the war started in June the 22nd, 1941. It was on a Sunday the war broke out, and on Monday the news was very bad, and we started to try to escape. My father had a horse and buggy. We loaded up the whole family, and we tried to go to Russia. But the Germans were coming a lot quicker, and they overtook us, so we were behind the German lines.
How many people were with you? Who was with you?
With us,
Yes.
my father, my stepmother, me and my wife and the two children, my sister, two sisters, one child of my older sister, and I think this were all. But we couldn't proceed much farther because the Germans, we had very bad news to not only the German but the Lithuanian people were against the Jews, and in most little towns they killed them right away. So we decided it would be safer to be in a bigger city, and we turned back and we came back to Šiauliai. When we came back in Šiauliai after a week or so, most Jewish men were already in the jails, and I went back to the factory where I worked. It was taken over by Lithuanians, everything, but they needed me as a bookkeeper, so they gave me a paper to protect me that they need me to work, and this kept me out of jail. Later on, in August of 1941, they established a ghetto, the Germans, and they didn't have one place, so they made two ghettos, separate places of the city.
Can you tell us what the ghettos were like?
What?
And what were the ghettos like? What was life
The
like?
ghetto life was two families in a little house, and cramped, and work was no work. Later on, they start take us out to work, and we were adjoining, one ghetto was adjoining a leather factory, and a lot of Jewish people worked in the leather factory. The Lithuanian people were not friendly. They blamed the Jews for everything, and but we found a work, and we worked in a factory. But they couldn't find work for everybody, so the biggest part were gathered up, and as far as we found out, my father, my stepmother, my two sisters, her husband, and a child, they perished in the woods not far from our city. My other brother, my brothers, they managed to get to Russia and spend their time in Russia. But the two ghettos in time were they didn't want to keep two ghettos. They consolidated and made one out of them and took out older people and children. On November the 5th, 1943, they took out 616 older people and children and shipped them to Germany, to Poland in concentration camps. Our two children were with in this shipment. We never heard exactly what happened, but the Lithuanian people, we knew, neighbors, once in a while we could get together with them. some of the people changed their attitude toward Jews and they tried to help us.
Can you
We
tell
had
us how old your children were and what their names were?
6 and 3 years old. The boy was 6. It was in November 43. And we found out that they shipped them, took them in boxcars and shipped them to Poland. Now, after they consolidated the ghettos, there were not many people left. Most of the work was in the leather factory, and part of us worked in a slaughterhouse and for the German army. But by 1944, things got worse. After the news from Stalingrad were bad, they decided to ship us to Germany. In 1944, in July, it's around the 20th or 25th, I don't exactly recall, we were shipped to Germany. We had to walk about 30 kilometers to get to a railroad station, and they didn't let us take anything with us, just what we could carry.
Who went with you to Germany?
Germans.
Who in your family went with you? Was it your wife?
Me, my wife.
Any other family members?
No, nobody we were just the two of us. And my wife, she had a brother and a wife and a child, which survived the action against children. She was about 5 years old, a girl.
Did they go to Germany with you?
Yeah, they took us to Stutthof. It's a concentration camp close to Danzig. In Danzig, we didn't have anything to do there. So when things got worse for the Germans, they decided to ship us farther in Germany. In September of 44, we were shipped to Mildorf. Mildorf is a camp, a branch of Dachau, and we built an underground factory. There were about 5,000 Jewish people from all over the world.
What kind of factory was it?
I couldn't hear you.
What kind of factory did you build?
Underground factory, they didn't say what, we didn't know what was going. We just built the factory, just the shell of it. The factory was never finished, and when the Americans liberated us, they destroyed the whole thing, blew up the whole thing. I was separated at that time from my wife. She stayed in Stutthof, and they took her for work and farm. She worked for a few months at a farm, and then was transferred to a cheese factory. But when the Russian army approached, they took him away and marched them deeper into Germany. But everything was going slow because they had no transportations, everything. So they kept them in barns in the winter time, kept them in the barns, and a lot of the women perished. But my wife, she was stronger and younger, and she managed to survive. She was liberated by the Russian army on March the 10th, 1945. We, deeper in Germany, in Bavaria, Mildorf, stayed in the camps till April the 30th, 45, and we were liberated by the Third American Army. And we were liberated in a train. The Germans, on April the 25th, they loaded us in trains and tried to ship us deeper into mountains. And as far as we found out, they wanted to kill us there. But then we were cut off by the American army coming from Italy and coming from the west. And we were liberated in the train. The American right away start taking care of us, and they found a place where we could be settled down. It was a big German Nazi school in Feldafing. And we said, they gave an order to vacate everything, some houses and school, and they established this Feldafing displaced person camp.
This was in April 1945.
April the 30th, we were liberated, 1945.
When did you reunite with your wife?
My wife, I didn't know anything about her. She didn't know anything about me. But then the Russians came over and tried to coax us to go back to Russia. A few people went, and they met my wife, and they told her I'm alive in Germany. She was registered to go back to Lithuania, because when we parted, we decided we'll meet again. If we survive, we'll meet again in Lithuania. But since she found out that I'm in Germany, I'm not going, so she decided to stay. She figured I must have a reason. So when I got back on my feet, it was July the 25th, 1945. Me and two friends of mine set out to look for our wives. We didn't want to leave Germany. Before we looked through Germany, we went to a few places. Between them, we went to Bergen-Belsen. It's a German concentration camp close to Hanover. And we found 3 women from our city which knew me and knew my wife. And they told me they didn't see my wife for the last 3 months of their being in Germany. Then we went to another place. I don't recall the name. It's a place close to Danish border in Germany. We found another girl from our city, and she didn't know anything, but we were told that a lot of Lithuanian women survived and they're living in Poland. We went to Lodz, Poland. On our way to Poland, we stopped in German town of Asch. It's on the Czechoslovakian border. There we tried to get a permit to cross the border. So we went in the office of the military government, and who do you think we found there? Between all of them people waiting for permits to go someplace, we found the leader of our Nazi camp, the leader of the concentration camp Mildorf. I didn't know him, I wouldn't have recognized him, but the two friends, my friend, one was his private chauffeur, and the other one was his barber. So when they saw him, they just drew back and they pulled me out and told me, Max, keep watch of this. This is Walter Langlist. So, and I watched him so he wouldn't disappear. He didn't see them. So they went and called an MP man, and they told him this is Walter Langlist. And they disappeared. He themselves. The MP man went up to him with this chauffeur of his. He took him. The German saw him, and his name was Max too. He said, Max, what are you doing here? And just like this. And the MP man said, do you know this man? He got mixed up, said, no, I don't know him. I just made a mistake. He asked him, what's your name? He said, my name is Max. He asked him, how comes you knew his name? He confessed that he's Walter Langlist. They arrested him and went right away to the quarters where he used to live, and they found there Maria Mandel, his mistress. Maria Mandel was famous for torturing people in Polish camps. She was extradited to Poland, and I don't know what they shoot her or she was sentenced to die. And Walter Langlist was sentenced to die in Landsberg prison. At that time, it was a trial for 20 Nazi, and he was hanged in Landsberg prison. We saw even the paper. I had a picture, I don't know where it was, of all the group. So after this, we went in, looked for a permit to cross the border. It was the day when the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan. I remember this because I saw the headline in the paper. We asked the CIC man, it was not CIA, but the CIC at that time was military intelligence. And he told us that the war is over. It will be a question of another couple of days. They couldn't give us a permit to go to Poland, but they gave me a letter to whom it may concern that we were helpful in capturing a high-ranking Nazi officer and to give us any possible assistance they can. So we had to find a way to cross the border from Germany to Poland, to Czechoslovakia, and we joined a shipment of Polish former camp inmates who went to Poland, and we got through Czechoslovakia and arrived in Poland. In Poland we went to Lodz. This is a town where most of the Jewish survivors settled down for the time being. Then we found people from our city, and they told me that my wife is alive, and the last she was seen was in Torun.
Where's this at?
A city in Poland. It's spelled T-O-R-U-N, Torun. And I went there. There were a lot of camps. They didn't know what camp, but there were a lot of camps Russian and Polish and Jewish. And I started to look in the camps. My luck, I was always in the wrong one. At last, again in the evening, I went to the right camp. I didn't want to go into the camp because once we got in, the Russians were watching and wouldn't let you out. So, through the fence, I got in touch with a woman, and I asked her, and she knew my wife, and she said, yes, she's here. So I went into the camp. This was around, I would say exactly 44 years ago, 43 years ago. No, 42 years ago. It's around August the 30th or 31st. And we were reunited there, but things were so bad they couldn't get out. So we had to sneak out through the fence because I didn't want to stay there. We didn't want to go back to Lithuania. And we decided to go back to Germany and see how things will turn out. Where everybody will go, we will go. So we sneaked out through the fence.
How long were you in the camp in Poland for?
I wasn't in Poland. There wasn't in a camp. We left the camp the same day because we didn't want to stay there. My wife, she was registered to go back to Lithuania, but she missed the transport intentionally. And the leadership of the camp had an eye on her because she missed the transport. So we decided the same day we'll go back, and we waited for a train. A train took us back from Thorn to Lodz. In Lodz we stayed for about a week. It wasn't a house where a lot of Jewish people settled down. For the time being, nobody had a home, nobody had anything, nobody had just a sleepover. And then things got bad in Lodz. The Polish people were there were some killings of Jews after the war, and it wasn't safe, so we decided to go back to Germany. Going back to Germany wasn't easy. You had to have money, but we managed some way to come back to Prague, Germany, to Czechoslovakia. We had some money, but crossing the Polish Czechoslovakian border, they took everything away from us. I even had a pair of pants they took away from me. An extra pair of pants they took away from me.
Who was with you and who took your belongings with government?
I didn't hear.
When you crossed into Czechoslovakia, were you with your wife?
Yeah.
And was anyone else with you?
We took another woman from our city. She survived and she wanted to go with. She didn't know anything about her husband, and she wanted to go with us. So we took her with us, and we were three of us. And in Prague we lived for a few days and tried to catch a train back to Germany. We had this paper which I said the CIC gave us, and we tried to get a hold of the Czechoslovakian liaison officer, but we had no luck. We couldn't get him. So we decided to go without a permit. But we came, the train took us to the German border, and the Russians wouldn't let us cross. I showed them the paper, they couldn't read, they didn't know anything, so they sent us back to Prague. I told him, I could speak Russian, I told him, we have a paper, and if you send me back, I said, I come back with the next train. So one of them, before the train came, one of the Russian officers called up a guy. He said, what this guy will tell me, I will do. He said, he can read. No, it wasn't like this. They sent us back to Prague. In Prague back, we had got a hold of the liaison officer, and he gave us a permit to cross the border. But the Russians, they couldn't read this German, nothing, so they didn't let us cross. There were a lot of Jews trying to go back to Germany, and they sent everybody back. But I told him, I have a permit, and I have the right to cross. He called up another man and told him, what you will say, I will do. So the Russian looked at this paper, and it was an official paper, but the American and in Russia they use a stamp. On every paper they have to have a stamp. Had a round stamp, and this paper they didn't have a stamp. So this Russian says, his paper looks different, he said. Everybody was showing anything we could find. They said, this paper looks different. So just a minute before the train took off, they put us on a train and let us cross. We went back to Feldafing, and where we trying to establish a life as close as possible in privacy. We got a room, and I was working the administration of the camp. My wife got pregnant, and in June the 6th, 1946, twin daughters were born.
What are their names?
Helen and Rose. And we didn't know what we will do, because at that time even the chief of our camp, an army officer, American army officer, told us not to go back to Lithuania. He said, it will be found a place where you will be able to settle down sometime, and I would suggest you don't go back to Russia. There's nothing good waiting. So we decided to stay in Germany. We lived in the camps. Mostly people were not working there, but we were fed and clothed by the UN, or what's called the UNRWA, UNRWA. And when time came, in the meantime, I got in touch with an uncle of mine in Cleveland. He read my name in a paper that I survived. I couldn't write to him, but he found a way to an army chaplain, and his letter got to me, and he asked me what he can do for me. So I told him we would like to come to America. He sent out papers for us, but in 1946, he decided to move from Cleveland to Los Angeles. He went there to Los Angeles, bought a house, and before even his family could move, he died of a heart attack. So we lost contact again, and in the meantime, my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, he got in touch with his cousins in Columbus.
Who were these people in Columbus?
They were Weitzman, and Danny Weitzman, a druggist. You know him? He was a second cousin of my wife's mother, and his grandfather were brothers and sisters. So we got in touch with them, and they sent us affidavits that we could come over. At the same time, I got an affidavit for my aunt to go to Los Angeles. But since my uncle was dead, and my wife's brother settled down in Columbus, we decided to go to Columbus too. We arrived in Columbus on July 22nd, 1949. Our girls were 3 years old at that time, and I started to look for a job right away. We didn't expect anybody to help us. I was always on my own. And on the 5th day, I got a job at Schenck, car motor rebuilders. I worked there for 2 weeks, but they laid me off. They didn't have enough work, so. But I was lucky. My brother-in-law was a barber, and some man came in and he started to talk. Said, I just arrived and maybe he knows anybody wants to hire me. There was Mr. Nate Nedelman. You know him?
Yes.
And he took me to work for 3 weeks. I was about 3 weeks in the States. I started to work for him. I couldn't speak much English, but I tried to learn as quick as possible. And they were good to me, Mr. Nedelman, his partner, Fisher, Mr. Al Fisher, he's dead now. He's been dead for a long time. And I stayed with them. First, I used to be in a warehouse and help out, shipments, make shipments, check in at merchandise coming in. And then later on, I started to go out as a helper, installing windows. And after a few years, I learned the trade, and I started to go on my own. I stayed with Mr. Nedelman for about 1960. About 11 years I worked for him, and till his brother came in partnership, and his brother started making changes. I decided to buy my own truck and work subcontracting windows, doors, awnings. Oh, I was lucky. I had a good name in my work, and I was never out of work for a day. My wife never worked, because she was always with the children. And I worked hard, sometimes 12 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. we didn't ask for any support from anybody. Like I said, we came with $130 from Germany, and this is how we start our living. And even the Welfare Federation didn't give us anything. They told us we can't get anything because they didn't bring us over. They blamed the family. They have to support us if we need. But we didn't ask for any support. We learned to live with what we had and what I was making. Like I said, I never was out of work one day. And I worked hard, but I gave my family everything I could. But in the meantime, we managed our finances so we wouldn't have to ask for anything, and always tried to save something. I was making $32 a week, $36 a week, and we lived with my brother-in-law in the double on Weger Street. And then it was hard to get an apartment. It was hard to get an apartment, so we decided we'll try to buy something. A friend of ours told us that some lady, Mrs. Dworkin on Carpenter Street, she wanted to sell a half a double.
You bought your first house.
I didn't hear.
That was your first house that you were able
First
to buy?
house in 1950. We moved in 1949. In 1950, we bought a half a double. The reason she sold a half a double, because she had a bad tenant, which turned her in. She came in and asked her to fix up the house, and she offered her a raise. After she did this, the tenant went to the price control office and turned her in that she raised the rent. So she wanted to get rid of the tenant, and the only way she could is by selling the half a double.
After you did this, you stayed in Columbus and you continued to work as a window
We
installer?
stayed in Columbus all the time. We never went any place.
And both of your daughters are still living
They
here?
live here. They went to South High. First they went to Livingston Public School, Livingston Avenue, and then they transferred to South High. No, first Roosevelt Junior High School and then South High. We lived all the time in Columbus. In 1957, we managed to buy another house on Berkeley Road. And since the neighborhood on Carpenter got bad, so we decided to buy the house on Berkeley Road. Berkeley Road we lived till 1964. And the change of the neighborhood forced us out of there because we were with girls. We were afraid for their safety, and we moved to our present address in Whitehall. I retired from my work in 1976. I retired from my work on Social Security. But for 4 years I went on working part-time till November 1980. We made a trip to Israel in 1977. We spent there about 5 weeks. I visited with my cousin. We lived with my cousin, but we traveled all over Israel, to Jerusalem, Haifa, Galil, Sinai, and there.
Is there
There-
any? You've told us your story from what it was like in Lithuania till you got here. Is there anything more you want to tell us about what life was then,
Where?
or you pretty much covered it?
In Lithuania, you mean?
Yeah, you told us pretty much what your life was, where you were born, when you went to the Ukraine, and then your family. Is there anything more you want to tell us about that? Or you pretty well covered it?
Oh, there was nothing special. Life was good. The Jewish people live their own life in Lithuania. We had our own schools, and we felt kind of safe. There was people, Jewish people in Poland, they didn't feel as safe. In Lithuania, felt a lot safer. Maybe if the Russians wouldn't come over, it wouldn't be so bad. But when the Russians come over, they blamed that the Jewish helped the Russians. Communists take over everything, and they turned against the Jews. But later on, during the German occupation, later on, they found out who the Germans really were. And we had support from the Lithuanian people. We had a neighbor, she even took a chance. She would bring us food in a ghetto. We used to go out, they used to see us, find us where we work, and used to help us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It wasn't easy.
We know